President Edgar Lungu has cast his vote in what is a keenly observed election in his southern African nation. 16 presidential candidates are vying for the top job, but the frontrunners are incumbent Edgar Lungu and his longtime nemesis, business tycoon Hakainde Hichilema, who are facing off at the polls for the third time now. Approximately 7 million citizens are registered to vote for a president, legislators, and local government representatives. And the polls opened at 6 in the morning and will close in 12 hours, rather, will close 12 hours later at more than 12,000 voting stations across the vast country. The winning candidate must receive more than 50% of the votes to avoid a runoff. The electoral agency says it expects to declare a winner within 72 hours after the polls close.
We are ready to vote, and we've turned up in numbers. I saw a number of queues as I was coming here, reminiscent of what happened in 2011 when people turned out en masse. And I hope that many more people will come and cast their vote, and the best candidate win.
Joining me now to talk further about this is researcher and analyst at the Institute for Security Studies, Ringisai Chikohomero. Ringisai, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us on In Focus. The voting has begun in Zambia. Did the process get off without a glitch?
Thank you for having me. Unfortunately, the process has been characterized by many glitches so far. Firstly, some polling stations failed to open on time. Secondly, there are some one or two polling stations where the Zambia Electoral Management Body was refused entry because they failed their debt from 2016 that they had not paid. So they had to find a new polling station. And this really caused a lot of disruptions as the people who were supposed to vote at those polling stations did not know where to go. There were also challenges with the recently introduced biometric verification system. And many people were really frustrated, especially in Lusaka, and they could not cast their vote. I was talking to a few friends in Lusaka who actually mentioned that they, by 12 p.m. they'd been at the polling station from 4 a.m. and they'd been moved from one area to the other without getting real direction and clear answers. By 12 p.m. they just gave up and went back home. So there's been a lot of irregularities. There's been a lot of technical and operational challenges in the setting up of the polling station and running in general. Just a few hours ago, the main opposition contender, Hichilema, was imploring on the Electoral Commission to allow the people who had been on the line by 6 p.m., as is allowed by the law, to at least vote, because the lines were still stretching very far off, and voting seemed to be going on up until later on. So there's been a number of glitches that will really impact on a number of citizens who wanted to cast their votes.
Yeah. In law, of course, even though the polls closed at 6 p.m., those who were already in the queue are allowed to yes, continue to vote, and this is the issue raised by the opposition. Do you think that this is a requirement that will be respected, especially seeing that these elections are also happening under limitations, particularly when it comes to the internet?
Yes, I think you've mentioned a key point. So the challenge we have is of information flow now. Now at 9:30, we haven't had a good information flow to feed us in. As is the law, anyone who is in the line by 6 p.m. should be allowed to vote. But there's so many parts of Zambia that we do not have access to. There's no, in terms of internet coverage and so on. So we do not have information coming in to see if this been honored in every polling station across Zambia, or it has only been in places where there's people who can be vocal and people can bring it up to the international stage through internet and other social media platforms.
And in as far as the turnout of people, was it a good turnout? Of course, there have been these issues around the electoral register being possibly rigged, or at least to favor the incumbent.
Yes, so the late decision to shift between the biometrics and the old way caused a bit of confusion and a bit of frustration in terms of the voters who would not really know how this works, because there was not enough time to really sensitize people on how this is going to work and really align it with the voters' role. So the first challenge is we really do not know who finally was able to vote. But the biggest challenge now is to say, in the areas that we've had access to, we've seen lines and lines of people queuing to vote. There's been people who have been waiting on the line since 4 a.m., some reportedly since 1 a.m., to make sure that they're the first one to cast their vote. But we do not know if this is the same reality of obtaining in the more remote and rural areas. In the outskirts, like in the northern region and in the southern region, we do not know what has been the obtaining reality. There's been a number of reports, some surveys that were done earlier this year, which had a prediction that there might be a lot of voter apathy. But what we saw in terms of what was coming in on social media was lines and lines and queues of people voting, and so it could be taken that people came out in their numbers. But these numbers that we have on social media can be deceptive. You know, in the recent years, when you're doing an analysis of elections, you really try and get raw data than what you get on social media, because what you get in social media is dependent upon people who have access to internet and people who have access to data and the platforms that social media provides for. But with many people in Africa and Zambia is no different, who do not have access to social media and access to internet. So we do not really know if the numbers that we have seen in urban centers are reflective of what has been happening across the country in this election.
Yeah. The social media block and messaging platform block in Zambia, could that result in more tension, as I believe some violence has also been reported in some area, including the Electoral Commission investigating a killing of a chairperson of one of the provinces there? And could this also lead to issues of credibility around the outcomes of this vote?
Yes, so you know, when we look at the electoral process, we should really look at it in its comprehensiveness, not as to a one-day event. And it's very important that you raise this issue of transparency, legitimacy, and credibility. And we have already seen in the last 2 weeks, the president had deployed the military in the streets. Is a kind of a preemptive move to quell any opposition clamoring for irregularity and potential contestation post-voting and election results. So what we are really seeing in terms of muzzling of the media and muzzling of the social platforms is an attempt again by the current regime to control the narrative and really blind the international communities to the happenings in Zambia, a country which has had the military deployed in at least for 2 weeks now against the protestations of the civil society and the opposition in that country.
A closely contested election, clearly, between the two. The likelihood of the loser readily accepting the outcomes of these results quite slim. In fact, JP Morgan saying the election process could drag on for weeks.
There's a high likelihood. So nothing from President Lungu's demeanor and even words points to someone who is prepared to concede and